D4 Deep Dive is a fantastic optimization channel. Out of all the D&D channels, he's definitely got the most powerful build. I mean, he's got the most powerful character builds. No, but seriously, my wife called him the buff D&D guy. I guess she hasn't been watching too many of my videos. Out of all the D&D builds he's done, he has claimed several times that this is the most powerful one. The only problem is it's a control build, and there isn't a good way to calculate control per round, unless you're a weirdo like me who's made a way to do it. I'm going to analyze his build, and I'm going to calculate what the control per round of this amazing build will look like. I'm hoping we can find out what an extremely powerful control build would look like in terms of CPR. Behind the scenes here, I'll also calculate the damage and the durability of this build, but I'm not going to show those calculations because I want to focus on the control here. Let me give you a quick intro into my control analysis system, what it is and what it isn't. The goal is to give a relatively objective number to quantify how much control a character can do. Now, this number isn't perfect. Some types of control are just naturally better in certain circumstances than others. For example, forced movement is situationally pretty good, but when you have spike growth up, it becomes extremely good control. The numbers don't reflect this. You'll have to use your judgment and decide what type of control will be best for you in your circumstances. The way this analysis works is by taking the unconscious condition as a basis for everything. I give it a value of 100, and then I take that value and I divide it up based on the little subsections of unconscious. Then I can take these little pieces and I can use them to construct control values for every buff, debuff, or control spell or ability in the game. Then, when we want to calculate control, we take that value and multiply it by the chance to hit. This means it's very similar to damage calculations. There's a video up here if you want to see the details. Now, this way of doing it might be a little rough or unrefined, but it does give us a good idea of what our character's control capabilities are. And for reference, 25 control per round is a moderate control. It's something like a grapple build can do. Then 50 is good control. That's something maybe like the hypnotic pattern. Then 100 is amazing control. Honestly, when building the system, I wasn't even sure if 100 was an attainable CPR. I'm hoping if anything can do it, the most powerful control build in the game will be able to. Fingers crossed. Now, before we start the analysis, I want to give a quick rundown of what the character is, then I'll run the analysis at levels 5, 9, 13, and 17. This character is a Leonin. That is a lion type race, and they have a special ability to do a roar as a bonus action to frighten enemies nearby. For class, we're mainly an enchantment wizard, but we have a 1-level dip in fighter for some defensive abilities, and we also take some bard levels to get the unsettling words ability. This will let us land our control spells more often. For tactics, usually we start the encounter with a big control spell, then we use our hypnotic gaze for most of the rest of the turns. For our bonus actions, we either use the daunting roar from our Leonin race, or we use telekinesis. Here are the starting ability scores, and we're going to start as a fighter. This means we're going to have heavy armor and shield, and that'll boost our AC a lot. Then we take 4 levels of wizard and take the enchantment subclass. The most important thing here is we get the hypnotic gaze ability. There are 2 great things about this ability. One is that it's concentration free, so we can have a big concentration spell and do this at the same time. The second is that they only get 1 save. If we hit them the first time, we can use our action to renew it each turn, and they don't get to save from it. The only way to break free is if they take damage, or if we get moved in some way that we're no longer within 5 feet of each other. Now, let's take a look at how much control this hypnotic gaze will exert. It's going to be some straight math for a bit, so brace yourself. For incapacitated, this means they can't take actions, bonus actions, or reactions, and that gives us a value of 48 control points. Then they have a movement of 0, and that is 12 control points. So if our hypnotic gaze hits, that would be 60 control points. That means you're 60% of the way to the unconscious condition. Now, according to the tables I have, the average wisdom save for a CR5 monster is around 2. So if we have a DC of 15, that means we have a 60% chance to hit. So on the first turn we do this, our control would be 60 times 0.6, which means 36 control points. We can use our action each turn to continue this, but there is a chance that they are going to take some damage and break out of this. Either there's some AoE damage that hits them, or your allies have no one else to hit so they target them, or whatever. Here I'm using a 25% chance that they take damage each round. So if we attempt to continue for 2 more turns, our control value would be 27 and 20.25 respectively. This would give Hypnotic Gaze a total value of 83.25 for the entire fight. As for the big control spell we want to do, there were 3 suggestions given in the build, and that was Web, Suggestion, or Hold Person. And I think Hold Person was given more preference, so we're going to do that. Hold Person gives the Paralyzed condition, and this is a brutal condition to inflict. It gives them the Incapacitated condition, a speed of 0, advantage on any incoming attacks, auto crits if they're within 5 feet, and automatically failing some saving throws. The control value for this is 94. It is almost identical to the unconscious condition in terms of control value. Again, with a 60% chance to land, we end up with a control value of 56.4. This one doesn't break when they take damage, but they do get a saving throw at the end of each turn. So if we use this on the first turn of combat and keep it up, we end up with these values, which total to 122.7. Is this getting too tedious? We're going to cover Daunting Roar and Telekinesis, and then we'll sum them all up. Daunting Roar gives the Frightened condition to any enemy within 10 feet of us. Frightened is worth 24 control points, and we have a 50% chance to hit. So that's 12 control points per enemy we hit. So assuming we hit 2 people, that's going to turn into 24 control points. Finally, the Telepathic feat gives us a bonus action that we can push or pull our enemies 5 feet. Every 5 feet of force movement is worth 5 control points. Unfortunately, it targets the strength save, and enemies at CR5 have a bonus of around 2.33 to their strength saves. So if we do the math, it turns into 2.08 control points each time we use this telekinetic bonus action. For a 4-round encounter, which is what we're going to use here, we would use it 3 times. Alright, so now let's tally it up. We have 122.7 points for Hold Person, 83.3 for Hypnotic Gaze, 24 for Daunting Roar, and 6.2 for Telekinesis. That totals to 236.2. If we want to calculate it per round, we divide that by 4 to get 59 CPR. Thanks for sticking with me through the math, and I hope these control calculations are making sense. 59 CPR is very, very good for level 5. It is the control equivalent of knocking 2 people out unconscious throughout the course of the fight. Let's continue on from here and hope we can get to that 100 CPR. From level 6 to 9, we stay in Wizard, and we'll get an ASI, so we'll max our int. Our tactics mostly remain the same, but we have some new control spells here. Banishment is the one that's suggested by D4, so we'll do that here. Also, we're going to start introducing Mind Whip here as a good alternative. Instead of doing 3 turns of Hypnotic Gaze, we'll do 2 turns and then 1 Mind Whip. Now let's do an analysis for the Banishment and Mind Whip and calculate our CPR at level 9. Banishment is a great 4th level control spell. It can completely remove an enemy from the combat. Often you banish one enemy, take care of all of its friends, and then pop it back in and take care of it all alone. For control points here, the enemy can't interact with us at all. So their actions, bonus actions, movement, and reactions, none of those matter. So it has a control value of 60. With a 66% chance of landing it at this level, that means we do 39.6 control points. And then, on subsequent turns, it's not going to get any chance of escaping unless our concentration breaks, so it'll do 39.6 control points each turn. Now let's take a look at Mind Whip. It's a really interesting and really powerful spell. It lets the enemy either take an action, a movement, or a bonus action. So if the enemy only has melee attacks and nobody's in melee range, they have to move, and that means they can't attack. So let's say they have a 50% chance of denying them their action and a 50% chance of denying them their move. That would mean when the spell lands, we do 26 control points. And the great thing about the spell is it actually targets the int save, so it's a lot easier to land. It's a 73.6% chance of landing, so that gives us 19.1 control points for a Mind Whip. Now, I'm not going to show you the calculations for Daunting Roar, Hypnotic Gaze, or Telekinesis again, but know that these numbers are changing because the DCs are changing and monster saves are changing. So for our control at level 9, we have Banishment at 158.4, Hypnotic Gaze at 64.9, Mind Whip at 19.1, Daunting Roar at 22.5, Telekinesis at 5.8. This totals to 270.7 or 67.7 CPR. Now this is a boost from level 5. It's not quite at 100, which is what I'm hoping for, but it's improving. I should note that if you were to use an AoE control, something like Fear or Hypnotic Pattern, the CPR would increase quite a bit. Actually, if I run the numbers, Hypnotic Pattern gives us a CPR of 92. That's pretty close to 100. Now you might say, well then obviously we should do Hypnotic Pattern, and maybe that is the good call. But Banishment is also a really good option, and it really depends on what your combat is looking like. Obviously, if you do Hypnotic Pattern and only target one person, it's going to be less than just doing Banishment. Let's continue on, taking a look at levels 10 to 13. Here, we go up to Wizard 10, and we get the ability Split Enchantment. This means when we use an enchantment spell and target one person, we can split it and target two people. This will be really great for the Mind Whip spell. Then we take 2 Bard levels and we get some Bardic Inspiration, but we can't use Unsettling Words yet, so we'll talk about that later. Now we also get some new spells here, and the standout is clearly Wall of Force. It's an amazing control spell. You can lock enemies in there, they don't get a save to avoid it, and it's almost impossible to destroy. They can't escape it except by teleportation. So all in all, it's really good. In terms of control, it's really similar to Banishment in that we deny them their ability to do anything useful. So that turns into 60 points, and we have a 100% chance to hit. So it stays at 60 points. Based on the size of the Wall of Force and the fact that we can friendly fire, so it might be hard to place it, I use this multiplier table here to calculate that we would hit 1.7 people on average. So we end up with a control value of 102. I'm liking that. One thing I should mention though is that we can't have the Wall of Force up the entire fight. Otherwise, we're not going to fight them. So we'll have it up for, let's say, 3 rounds, then everybody gangs up on them for the last 4th round. So to calculate our CPR at level 13, we have 306 for Wall of Force, 61.4 for Hypnotic Gaze, 38 for Mind Whip, which is being split to hit 2 targets, 20.9 for Daunting Roar, and 6 for Telekinesis. This totals to 432.3 control for the entire encounter. And divided by 4 turns into 108 CPR. We have made it past 100 CPR. That is fantastic. Wall of Force is so good. Who knew? Even though we've reached our goal of 100, let's continue on in the build and see how far we get. From levels 14 to 17, we're going to take Bard up to level 5. This will get us our subclass, and it'll give us Font of Inspiration, which is a great Bard ability. We are taking the College of Eloquence subclass, which gets us the Unsettling Words ability. It lets us apply our Bardic Inspiration as a negative modifier to an enemy's save. This will really help our controls stick a lot better. Then finally, we take 1 more level of Wizard. This gives us access to level 6 spells, and we're going to take Mass Suggestion here. This is also an incredibly powerful spell, and it has the potential to instantly win fights. How it works is you suggest a course of activity that has to sound reasonable to a creature. Reasonable to 12 creatures. 12! You can target 12 creatures with this spell. If they then fail the wisdom save and the course of activity sounds reasonable, they then have to follow that for 24 hours. It's honestly crazy. It all comes down to what your DM would consider reasonable, so there's some leeway there. Colby from D4's suggestion was, run to Baldur's Gate. There is treasure awaiting you there. I mean, that sounds reasonable to me. So at this level, we're going to use our bonus action to Unsettling Words the most wise looking enemy there. Then we'll use Mass Suggestion. Then we'll continue as normal, using Hypnotic Gaze, Daunting Roar, and Telekinesis, Mind Whip. So let's run some numbers to calculate our CPR. Mass Suggestion, using the course of activity that Colby suggested, would essentially remove enemies from a fight. This would be 60 control points. Obviously, 12 enemies is a lot, way more than the average encounter. Here, I'm just going to use 3. It's conservative but reasonable. With Unsettling Words, one of those enemies has a negative D8 to their saving throw, so I'll say negative 4.5. This means it has a 77.5% chance of landing. For the other two enemies, they have a 55% chance of failing, so in total that gives us 112 control points. Assuming your allies aren't going to sucker punch them as they run away, maybe a long shot for your table, this will last the entire encounter, and 24 hours apparently. So for our CPR, we get 450.4 for Mass Suggestion, 57.8 for Hypnotic Gaze, 37.6 for Mind Whip, 19.2 for Daunting Roar, and 4.2 for Telekinesis. This totals up to 569.2 total control for the encounter. Divided by 4 turns into 142.3 control per round. We have blown that goal of 100 CPR out of the water. Turns out it is a reasonable number for us to aim for as a solid control build. Now, if we want to calculate an average for this character throughout their career, we can just add all those CPRs I calculated for levels 5, 9, 13, and 17, and we will get an average of 94 control per round. That is fantastic. Let me quickly take a look at the damage and durability of this build as well, just to round out the numbers and give us a good idea. For damage, we are extremely low. We would take out on average 2% of a deadly encounter. That means that the damage we deal equals 2% of a deadly encounter's HP pool. It's very low. For durability, because of our fighter dip, we have heavy armor, shield, and we take the defensive fighting style. So our AC is 19. Then when possible, we use our spare spells to cast shield. We can then use our con save, dex save, and our AC to calculate how much damage we would take over the course of the encounter, and how many rounds it would take us to die. If all the enemies target us with all their attacks, we would last 1.57 rounds of a deadly encounter. This is actually a pretty sturdy number. Not tanky, definitely not a glass cannon, but sturdy. So here's what our full character looks like: our damage, our control, and our durability. This was a great exercise, and stretching what our control per round can calculate, seeing what the most powerful control build in the game will offer. Thanks to Colby from D4 for this build and for letting me run some numbers on it. If you have a build you'd like to get analyzed, to take a look at their damage, control, or durability, let me know in the comments and we can take a look at that. And I hope to see you in the next one.